guys for coming back for the second round, and we're going to be a little more laid back this time around. I think wine and chat. But Cindy has something really cool that I want to start this off with. I'll just shut up and let her tell you. You guys are going to dig this. Check this out. Oh, and if you could remember to mute your mic, because I think that might be part of the issue with the connection. Thank you, lady. Cindy, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, this is the plaque I had made for it. I'll show you what it is, and then I'll tell you where I got it. Can you all see this?
You want to read it to us in case somebody wasn't really.
Sure, I'll read it. Isabel Gowdy, or Gowdy, however you pronounce her name, tombstone replica, Queen of the Witches, rumored to have been baptized by the devil. She was burned at the stake for witchcraft in 1674 Scotland. This sucker is heavy. It's made out of concrete or something. It's a replica of her actual tombstone. Well, the top half of her tombstone. My oldest son and I, back in December, the first part of December, we went into an antique store here in Charleston. And this was in the antique store set up as a Halloween decoration. We bought it, took it home, cleansed it. It sat for 90 days being cleansed before it was brought into the house. And I had this was originally on a piece of paper stuck to the side of the stone. And so, yeah, we brought it into the house now, but it's definitely not going to be a Halloween decoration, but it's stuff like this is what I'm talking about. This was actually taken cemented from like a tombstone etching, only with cement. It's a replica of the actual stone. And they don't know what the heck they're bringing back with it. And whoever did it either ordered it to be done from Scotland or had it done themselves and brought it into the United States from Scotland. So it's like, that's what we were talking about earlier about not knowing stuff at the antique stores. And if you don't know what you're doing, that's an example of stuff that can come with attachments.
Yeah. See, that kind of stuff scares me.
Yeah.
It should.
Wasn't it, who mentioned that they collect an antique? Is it Brooklyn?
Yeah, I have a weird obsession with crucifixes. I love them. So I'm hoping nothing evil is attached to my little Jesuses. That would be really upsetting.
If you're not sure, it's always better to be safe. Get it in a safe location outside and leave it in moonlight for a full moon session.
Oh, okay. I will do that.
Take a pot of dirt, like potting soil or dirt that you get from your yard, and bury it in there.
Okay.
And then it'll cleanse it because the earth draws the negativity out. And then just prayer of it that whatever is attached to it, you release it. You do not allow it entrance into your home.
Okay, I will do that. Because my biggest thing on the cats are with it.
Sorry. Do you have any other tips on maybe how to identify if something may have something attached to it, or
all of you have animals in the house? Watch your animals, they'll tell you.
Oh, okay.
Your animals will tell you. If they start looking at stuff and you don't see what they're looking at, but they're like hyper focused on it, you got something in there that you may not want in there. Stuff will start going missing, and then it'll show up in other places. You might have your electricity will suddenly start going like your light bulb will flicker or it'll blow out. When we went to a house one time when we were doing an investigation, they had just we flipped the light on, the bulb blew, put a fresh bulb in it, turned it on, it blew again.
Wow.
And I'm like, calling an electrician, make sure, electrician, there was nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong with the circuits or anything. He checked everything. So it's like, yeah, you need to, whatever you invited in, you need to resend that invitation.
Wow. When we first moved into this house, the spare bedroom, Icky would go in the one corner and just yell her head off, staring up into the one corner. And she only does it at night. She hasn't done it in a while. But when we first moved in for probably 3 months straight, she would be in that one corner of that spare bedroom and just scream the entire time.
Well, another thing you can do in your home, if you're not sure about it, is take water and salt in a spray bottle and spray your walls, your corners, your windows, everything. And it'll help, because salt is pure. So it'll help purify any energy that's not supposed to be there. Just like chalk works on ants.
I'm going to do that for sure.
So Cindy, speaking of objects and, cursed objects or, negative energy coming off objects, I'm curious what your thoughts are on gargoyles, because I have gargoyle figures around my house because I always thought of them as protectors against evil. But then I had my house cleansed and she was immediately drawn to my gargoyles and had to cleanse my gargoyles.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'm really curious of what your thoughts are on gargoyles in general, or maybe it was just that particular object and not the fact that it was a gargoyle. I don't know.
Okay, the thing with gargoyles aren't the only one, but that's the most popular one. Gargoyles originally on architecture, like on Notre Dame's loaded with them. They were protectors. They were to stop evil, especially demons. Okay. Personally, I don't believe in demons. I only believe in positive and negative, which is in nature. Everything that has a negative and a positive side. So, I mean, negative, if it's real negative, you want to call it a demon, that's fine. Whatever you're happy with identifying it, it's just a title. It's just a term. But a lot of stuff that gets brought in, a person's belief can empower it to the negative or the positive. It's just like if you're around someone that's always negative, they give off that negativity and you absorb it. Before you know it, you're feeling like miserable. You're feeling like you're mad all the time. And it's not because of you, it's because you're allowing that negative energy towards you. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with objects. Okay, so if you're giving it up, it's got to go somewhere and it's being absorbed. Remember, especially statues, they're porous. Mm-hmm. So it absorbs that energy and it's going to hold that energy and it's going to take on that manifestation of that energy. So it may be something like, to you, the gargoyle is a sign of, of something good, something, safety. But for somebody else, oh no, it's a demon because it's got wings and horns. Mm-hmm. So it's all perspective. If you feel comfortable with it and you don't feel threatened by it, then yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. Like, for example, I had someone come into my house back in California, and I'm very heavy. I'm half Native American. So you see, I have a lot of Native American stuff up here. She told me I had to get rid of everything, all of my Native American stuff, because it was letting in demons. And I'm like, gee, I wonder if my grandfather would agree with you.
Right?
But it's like, no, it's your actions, it's your own actions and your beliefs, and what you allow in is what's, so it's like, yeah, it's like everything. It's perception. Right. Just like when we were talking about horror, it's the same thing. It's all perception. It's how you see it,
Yeah, because when she had said that, I was like shocked. I'm like, what? No, those are I call those my guard dogs. I put them in specific locations in my house for a reason.
Because you feel a kinship to them.
They're bad.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Cindy, do you feel like words just expressing can rid your house of something negative if you've allowed it in? If I say you are not welcome here?
Yes. Because if you take ownership of your property, or whatever it is, and you tell them you're not wanted here, leave. If there's anything negative, like once a month, I go through my house and I sage, okay? And I'll just tell them anything negative is leaving. You're not welcome here. Anything hurtful or negative, vacate. You're not allowed here. Only light and happiness is allowed in through my doors and my windows. Okay. And I do it every month, but that's just because I have a lot of people that come in and out of here constantly. So
that was a really good question, Brooklyn, because, just the power of words, because when my husband was, I don't know, maybe like a preteen, his house was haunted and he was like tormented by a spirit that would come every night. And it didn't stop until he finally sat up and just said, just go away. Yep. Just leave me alone and just go away. And it wasn't until he just like sat up and just did that it just stopped.
Yeah, he took authority over his space. And that's pretty much what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. They say that a lot with like manifestation and stuff too, that what you speak becomes reality. So
it's not actually the words, it's the belief and the power behind the words. It's just like if you want something really bad enough and you concentrate on it, it's not the words, it's that force behind those words that's going to do it. So it's the same with negativity. If you're a negative person or you're constantly having negative people around you, they're going to draw all that negativity to you. Like that old saying, birds of a feather flock together. Well, that's got some truth to it. So you've got to get rid of all that because it'll affect you health-wise. You start absorbing it and it starts affecting your health, and it starts affecting your outlook on life itself. Everything, it just changes you.
So how do you stay positive or carrying a happy-go-lucky attitude, so to say, or positive outlook when you're dealing with such negative energy, such as from people or ghosts, or delving into your horror nightmares to write about them? Or how do you guys keep your balance? How do you keep from getting sucked into that black hole?
Yeah.
Well, I know for me personally, for my main character she's the villain, I guess, technically, but I feel like everybody kind of wants to be on her side. So maybe something with her charm kind of keeps us from seeing the depths of the horror of the things that she's doing, because we just kind of desperately want to be part of her gang. At least that's a lot of the feedback I get. So I think just liking my character stops me from kind of going to a really dark.
Well, too, I think if the readers can justify the actions that the character is doing, it kind of downplays that horror. It not downplays the horror, but the negativity of it. It's like, oh, well, yeah, that's bad, but you know what? She's justified in doing it, or something like that, So it makes it, yeah, it's really bad. It's, I would never do it, but yeah, I can see why she did it.
I think that's why we people can gravitate towards those kind of characters, because it's things that we all think about. Yep. Like, I would love to be able to just what they're doing is so wrong, and they just need to feel the wrongness in what they do. And I just want to do this and I want to do that. And it's like, you can't do it. Right. So what do? You write about it,
It's because society.
I think that's just, and I think people can just so gravitate towards that, because it's like the things that we wish we could do to justify things, and maybe in our twisted minds make things right. And so we I always say, those villains are usually the best characters, because
they have more depth to them.
Yeah, and you can just grasp onto that little piece of humanity that has been crushed and crushed and crushed by just life. And we all can feel that,
Well, we can all associate too. We can all recognize ourselves in it
Mhm.
to some level.
Exactly.
I
Wow.
actually had someone up to me at a convention who was at a different convention and had bought books from me. And when he came up to me at this other one a few months later, he was like, "So I started reading this book. Are there like any heroes in it, or is it all just bad guys?" And I was like, "Well, the bad guys are the heroes, okay?"
Yes.
Like, haven't you
yes,
ever heard
we
of
love those bad guys?
anti-heroes?
Yes.
The anti-villain.
Well, Brooklyn, you said that in your series, like you wrote a character that's like bad just because she likes to be bad. And
Yeah.
like there's no like sad backstory and like, oh my gosh, the tormented childhood. And because
No.
like I love that sympathetic villain. Like, so I like hearing you coming from like the other end, because like I would always be like, oh, that's just like they're just evil because they're evil and it's boring. And I'm like trying to get depth but it was cool to hear you come back to just like, some people just want to do bad shit because they're just bad and there's just no rhyme or reason and you can try to figure it out, but no, they're just shitty people and they want to do bad shit.
Yeah, the line I always point out from A Clockwork Orange when I talk to people about this, you know, he goes through a big spiel about like how he would never like interrupt what a good person does and how they get their jollies out of good stuff. So why should they come after him? And it's this big, long couple paragraphs, but it ends in the most simple way where he says, "But what I do because I like to do." So that always hits me. And I'm like, I just want a female character who is just power hungry and violent and self-centered. And it's not because she like, I didn't want to give my main character a backstory because I tend to think a monster is scarier when they're left kind of ambiguous. But I kept getting reviews, especially like with a second book coming out, where people are like, I just want to know what happened to her. I just want to know where this came from. Even though I'm very adamant on like all my social media all the time where I'm like, she doesn't have a tragedy in her past, I promise you. So book 3, we actually dive into the past a little bit. And she's always been the same person. Like I gave her, she has very wealthy parents, like in a small town, very well to do. She's very smart. She makes good grades. And she's kind of using her lunch breaks to like do drug deals and kind of start blood oaths with different guys and stuff. So I'm like, no, she's just bad. It's fun.
I like that because it's like it used to be the cliche that like it's just this evil villain that's just evil to be evil, but now everybody wants to give them the backstory and the depth. And but then you just go, I like that oh, you can have everything handed to you and life is great and you have money and you don't have to worry about anything. But guess what? You're still a terrible human being and you do terrible things and there's no rhyme or reason to it. Like, why?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know why. Like, it's just like life. You don't know why.
Well, here's a question for you authors. We were talking earlier about, you know, actual female authors and who had inspired us, but are there female villains or female characters in literature that have influenced you all? I mean, can you think of a female character that you've really thought, oh, this is one bad lady?
Black Widow.
Okay, no.
See, I can't, which is why I wrote my own, because I kept getting so irritated that every character that I kind of associate with or really love is male. And I'm like, I would love to just see myself sometime when I look at these characters I identify with. So I can't like pinpoint one. Even in Anne Rice's works, I love her. She has always been my queen. But the characters I'm most drawn to are male. Like she has a lot of really strong female characters. But like Armand is my favorite. I adore him. So I just wanted that like really strong female that, you know, for the people who do want to just be bad, I guess. But she has purpose too. I don't want you guys thinking it's just surface level. Deification is titled the way it is because the concept that I wanted to explore was idolatry and deifying someone else. So if you don't have a god, or if it's not the universe, if you don't have something higher than yourself that you believe in or you worship or you praise, then do you end up giving that to another person? And what are the dangers of that? So don't think just because she's bad being bad that there isn't some, you know, contemplation to the story too.
Well, I will say, and I don't know if anybody else has read this, you may have seen the movie, but League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. if you saw the movie. I mean, I enjoyed the movie, but it was based on a graphic novel. And in the graphic novel, Mina, the character of Mina Harker, was actually a lot more badass than she was in the movie. And I think she's definitely a good, strong female character in that sense. And she was one that kind of did bad things for the sake of doing bad things. Now, granted, she did have a bad backstory. I'm like, this is a lady I would not tangle with.
Right. And I don't want to say anything bad about the villains having backstories. Like, I'm not hating on that either, because I love a sympathetic villain too. I hate that the sympathetic villain is always female and the villain is always male. So that was my only hang up with it.
I personally love the male sympathetic villain because, I like the depth of the male character. And then if they turn around and, turns all horror and,
Do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite?
Yeah, like a favorite male villain in literature or film or genres?
I would say I like Michael Myers is one of my favorites. And in John Carpenter he's more of like the Brooklyn's villain, where he's just like evil and he's just killing to kill, and there's not a lot of depth to it. But when Rob Zombie took it over, he gave him more of a backstory. And he made him more of a round character instead of just the flat, stereotypical villain. And I really like that, because I think there's a lot to be said about our lived experiences and how they shape us as, people, and they navigate how we, experience life and make our decisions. And yeah, I'd probably say Michael Myers is my favorite, but I would say more of like Rob Zombie's take on Michael Myers, and Rob Zombie's got a lot of negative press because he's all into that, shock rock and gore, but if you really pay attention to what he does, there's like a lot more depth to the movies he makes than people really give him credit for. Like, he really is into all the shock and all that to grab people's attention. But, there's so much subtlety in his movies that gives every character like such depth that, if you're not really paying attention, you're not gonna catch it. But yeah, I'd say Michael Myers. There's a long answer, but yeah.
I think what you said rings true across the board too, with a lot of fiction, whether it's movies or books, that if you're not really paying close attention, you miss a lot of what's going on. A lot of it is so nuanced that you really have to focus.
Yes. Because like in Rob Zombie stuff, a lot of it's not in the dialogue, it's not in the actions, it's in what you're seeing, what's in the background, or what's like being focused on, and like what's being blurred in the background. Like, it's so many nuances, and even in the written word, it might be just in somebody's body language. What's coming out of their mouth can be completely different than the body language, and you just got to really pay attention to the subtleties,
I have a question for other writers, because when I write scenes, I feel like I kind of download them, like they're playing in my head like little movies. Like, I know what all of my characters look like. I know how they're standing, how they're looking at each other, what their faces are doing. Do you guys do that too, or are you not visualizers?
Completely visualizing. It's a movie happening in my brain as I'm writing it. Some people will tell me like, this reads more like a movie script. Like, you're giving like the actors direction and how to move and stuff. It's like, but they need to move that way so you get the full vibe of what they're saying. You need to, like, so much is said with how people move. Like, the spoken word is like minute in the meaning of what we're trying to express. And it's so hard to not put it on the page, because it's just like movie clips,
That's how it is for me too. I mean, even though it's just poetry and stuff based off of, life. I mean, a lot of my poems, yes, are based off of life. But a lot of it, it's just I get these crazy ideas, with whatever. And I just start, writing something. And then all of a sudden, like I said, I get like this crazy visual of what's going on. And then, like, for me, I get the visual, but I get like the full feeling. And then before I know it, I've got like 10 writings.
That's something I really admire about poetry, is because of it's like it makes me think of it's so musical, and it's like you really have to pay attention to the subtle notes in between, and it might be just a word choice or the way the line is broken that really can give the meaning and the emotion to the piece. And that's
exactly like specifically poetry has a rhythm to it.
Yes.
And the faster the rhythm, the more energy it. So yes, absolutely. 100%. And I literally watch my scenes running through my head, and I'm trying to describe them as fast as I can without giving too much details to make it boring, but just enough to keep the reader to where they can throw their 2 cents in, or how they envision the character. I think that's important too. I think sometimes that we over describe the scene or our character, and we don't allow our reader to be able to picture that person or that place in a way that they can relate to. I think sometimes too much detail is too much detail. Number one, it can slow down the story and make it boring. And number two, we're kind of stealing that opportunity from our readers to be able to relate to it in their own way.
Yeah, and speaking of that too, in executing that, it's hard. It's really hard to determine like what details should I focus in on to give it the meaning and the depth, but then what details can I just get rid of that are bogging down the narrative and like it's too much.
Right.
It's really hard to find that. There's really a fine line between that. And I think a lot of it also comes to like the taste in the reader. Like it's really very subjective. Like some people like these long drawn out descriptions of the scene and the way the front of the house looks, and down to the architecture of the door and how it's carved and the doorknob, and there might be all this depth to it. And other people are like, get the fuck moving, and I want to know what the hell's gonna happen. I don't care what the door looks like. I don't care what the doorknob looks like. Who is in this story? What's gonna happen? And there's like a fine line between that, like for the writer and the reader. It's like writing is hard.
I agree. 100%.
It was a little emotional, but yeah, writing is hard.
Writing is hard, and I've only dabbled in fictional writing. Usually, what I do is nonfiction, but I'm not even sure really which is harder, because I think, Tammy, you were saying earlier, you still have to have a kind of a talent or a storytelling skill to tell a nonfiction story.
Absolutely.
As you do with a fictional story. So yeah, I'm not even sure which one is harder. You're right, they are both hard.
Yeah, because if you're writing nonfiction, especially if it's on a subject matter that maybe your reader doesn't know anything about, or they may not realize that they could be interested in that subject, you've got to still make it active enough and enticing enough that they stick with it long enough to say, oh, wow, that really happened? Or, oh, this is cool. You've got to keep them entertained long enough to be able to give them the historical facts in order to educate them, so to say. You have to entertain them to educate them.
Well, and I can't remember who said it earlier, but it's true. Truth is stranger than fiction. And some of the true stories out there are more bizarre than anything anyone can come up with.
Oh my
True.
God,
That's
that is
true.
so true.
And honestly, people automatically hear, okay, historical or something like that, and they automatically like, oh, it has nothing to do with that. But actually, if they would, like I said, if you tell it in an entertaining way to draw them in, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, that really happened?
It's funny that you say that, because about history, like the subject of history, like always bored the crap out of me. And I didn't really start appreciating history until I started learning history through the literature that was written in that time period. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I love history. Like I can't get enough of it. Like, yeah, historical fiction is awesome. Like,
Yeah. You know, to add,
little website museums where you see like the old insane asylum, wheelchairs and things like that. Like Cindy was mentioning, the haunted artifacts. You go into these little off-site road museums and stuff, and man, you can come up with some of the craziest ideas for your fiction stories. And then, like Sharon was talking, there's so much cool real stories that occur that is attached to that. And because they're the off-side, off-the-road type things, out of the way kind of museums and stuff, yes, it's still history, but a lot of people don't see them.
mm-hmm.
you know, to add, the subject with the Holocaust. So I dropped out of high school, and so I never really learned about the Holocaust. But as I got older, I got into like the historical fiction, and I want to say probably last year is when I really got deep into reading stuff about the Holocaust and stuff. And I didn't realize that all this stuff had actually happened until I started digging more into like the actual factual stuff. But
The personal stories.
yeah,
You need to hear the personal stories, like
yes,
what people actually
yes.
experienced. You know,
And
like that's what got me when reading just about like American history, just
yeah,
hearing the slave stories. Like, I don't want to hear it from you white guys. I don't want to hear your washed out version of history. Like, I want
yeah,
to hear from like the people who lived it.
Right.
Yep.
And then when I heard those stories, I was like, wow.
yeah. There's one, I think it's called 10 Bridges or 10 Chimneys or something like that. That's from a survivor of the Holocaust. And the story is just, oh my gosh. And then the other story that's from a survivor is Last One In and Last One Out. And the detail that's in these books is just so vivid. It's honestly like a movie.
Mhm.
Well, speaking of truth being stranger or sometimes more horrific than fiction, as we've been talking about villains, one of my favorite literary villains is Dracula, the character of Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula and many of the incarnations, but the character, the historical figure Dracula was based on, Vlad Tepes, was far worse than the literary Dracula. And that's a case of, the history being worse and more horrifying than the fiction. And, and I think that's true in many cases. Jack the Ripper, that certainly was a horrifying actual person. Lizzie Borden, even, speaking of female villains, there's a female villain for you. And she, definitely was a horrific person. Whether she did it or not, she probably did, but she was definitely an odd character.
I find it interesting you talk about Vlad, because when I think of the historical depiction of him, I picture more of a sympathetic villain. When I hear about different quote unquote true stories of him, I get more sympathy for him than for the fictionalized ones.
Really? Why is that?
Well, I mean, Romania, like, he's a hero for Romanians.
Romanian folk hero, yes.
He's a hero. And he did what he did for his people, and And I mean, maybe it's the dark side of me, but I can relate to his, ways he went about things to, it's a means to an end, and he, I guess coming from like a protector's, a mother's point of view, like you do what you can do to protect your own. And those things might get dark, but guess what? Step the fuck off and know your boundaries and fuck off, and I don't know. I have more sympathy for him with the but that's just different, different strokes for different folks.
I do too, Renee. I think he did what he had to do based on the circumstances that he was living in, because if he had done it any other way, I think the Turks would have come in and taken over. And the Turks wanted his sons, and he had been a prisoner in the church, so he knew what it involved. It was like, hell no, my sons are not doing that,
Exactly.
So it was like, and then of course he was at that point, he was son of the dragon, which was an order. So it was his godly right and his duty to do whatever he had to do to protect to protect the Romanians. So he did what he thought he had to do and what he was able to do. But some of the stuff that he did to his own people too, I think a lot of that was he was building his reputation for the Turks.
Yeah.
Right.
And he also had a feud going with the nobility that were wanting to overthrow him. So it's like, well, hell, if he's going to do this to our own people, we're sure as hell not going to be seen as treasonous against him, because he didn't see the class. He'd stake you just as well as he did a peasant. So I think a lot with him is he did, in my mind anyway, he did what he felt he had to do to have the kind of rule or whatever that he wanted and the lifestyle he wanted for his people, and to get the Turks out of it, because by then they had been in there for generations.
Definitely.
And that's just me.
No, and I agree. I absolutely agree. He was a sympathetic figure, and he was a military genius.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, as you said, he did what needed to be done to save his people. But looking at it, and especially looking at it with a modern eye, wow, that was some pretty serious stuff.
Right. But you know what they say too? History is written by the winners.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
talk about another time, and you mentioned Lizzie Borden. I mean, that's somebody who would not probably have walked free in our day and age. Looking at her saying a woman wouldn't do this.
No, that was the whole reason she got off. They didn't believe a woman was capable of it.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, it's crazy how that time, just from that time to now, would have differed too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and there are some pretty serious women. I mean, women, as we all know, are very strong. Speaking of kind of along the lines of Tepish, Elizabeth Bathory. She definitely had she had processes that we would not approve of in modern times. Killing and bathing in the blood of virgins to keep herself young. Speculations that she was a vampire, and so there was also a female villain, but a strong woman. And, I have to look at women in history and like, wow, did you have to be a villain to be considered strong?
But I think back then, they had to go to the extremes because they were considered the weaker sex. Half of them, they weren't allowed to read, they weren't allowed to write. So it's like, they were property of their fathers, and then one became property of their husbands. Look, even women of power, Catherine the Great, the Tsarina of Russia, I mean, all of them, they all did, what today would be considered, nasty stuff, but they did it because they had to do it. Society kind of forced them into it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me like anything that drew attention. If a woman did anything that drew attention to her, that makes her stand out, and like, God forbid the attention is being taken away from the men, then all of a sudden she's evil for whatever reason. It could be good, bad, or indifferent.
Yep.
That's how I personally see it. Like, women are to be seen and not heard, and you do as you're told, and you abide by the borders that we give you. And if you step outside of those and you draw attention to yourself, guess what, Lilith? You are now evil and you're a cast out.
Yep.
That's how I see it. But I'm a cynic, so.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, look, they were even locking women up in insane asylums and doing shock treatment and stuff on them because they had depression, or one was screwing around on her husband. So, well, let's lock her up. She's,
Yeah, but they don't know that he's already having affairs with like 5 women, so that's why she's having the one affair.
Yeah, but that's
he's already
different.
seen
Men were
5
allowed to
other
do that.
women. Maybe he even has families with them too.
Yeah, but men were allowed to do that. It was almost expected.
Exactly, that's the norm.
Men are designed that way to go, produce progeny, blah blah blah. That's what they'll tell you. Not designed to be but women are.
Yeah, spread the seed,
And the odd
have
thing
you
is,
evolved yet? You just need to spread your seed. Like, it's time to evolve. Have you ever heard of Darwin?
Yeah. In like ancient times too, like women would typically have multiple male partners because that way, nobody could be sure of the paternity. So you now have, say, 5 men protecting this one child instead of just one. So it like kind of ensured that the generations kept going, that no crazy mammoth gonna come and like eat my baby or whatever. Not that I think but, I have 5 men now protecting my one child instead of just one.
That's awesome. And what a way to like exert your control, as the woman.
Yep.
I like that. Very devious.
But then too, in history, you've got some strong women. I mean, there's an Egyptian pharaoh that they believe was actually Nefertiti. Lived when her husband died and Tut took up, because she was Tut's stepmother. They believed that she took over and when he died, that she was actually ruling as a man.
Well, look at Native American history. Like, if our schools actually taught the real history of this country before like white man stepped onto the land, then they would find out that the women were actually the ones who ruled the colonies and the tribes, and the men were the fighters, and they got the food, and they were the faces that went to debate and negotiate.
The women owned everything.
Who were pulling the strings were the women. The women sent the men because the women are needed. The women can't go out and die. The women are needed because the women are what keep everything together. The women take care of the kids. The women take care of the education. The women take care of the food. The women take care of the housing. The men go fight. They get the food, and they're the face of the tribe.
Right.
It's the women who hold it all together.
Yeah. Well, the women also owned everything. The teepee, all of that, the women owned.
Yes.
What happened with that was just.
I have times changed.
Oh yeah.
Well, I love Queen.
With a lower heat tolerance too.
Yeah, the Virgin Queen.
The Virgin Queen. But there's a great story about her, about how, of course, in the Elizabethan times, they had those huge dresses, the noble women did. And there was a great story I read about her where, of course, you're not supposed to sit in the Queen's presence unless she would sit. And the story with she actually had a stool under her dress that she was sitting on, meanwhile making the male attendees stand, for hours and hours and hours on end. Like, you go, girl.
See, they needed to learn their place. She was the one to teach them that.
Yes. You want to make us wear corsets and stuff, Well, we know how to make you uncomfortable too.
Male characters who are just very soft, who do not play traditional male hero roles, who are not muscle bound and strong and brave, and men who are a little more shy and meek. How do you guys feel about those characters?
I just read the Paul Tremblay novel, The Cabin at the End of the World. And there's a couple in that, and one of the characters is that, you know, there's one that's the softer, and then there's the one that's the more assertive, like in any typical couple. And I really liked that character who is on the softer side, because I like men who can identify with their feminine side. I find that's the stronger male character if they can identify with both sides, you know, kind of the balance. But I can't remember. I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. I don't remember the character's name, but in the couple in that one was the softer and one was the more assertive, you know, and he was a really great character.
Yeah.
I agree. I like to see a softer male figure being portrayed in a book or a movie. They exist in real life, and it's kind of nice nowadays.
What do we do? Our leader's down.
I know.
Quick, we can talk about her before she comes back.
Modern
Well,
technology is great until it's not.
It
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've heard the saying, you know, the dogs are like, well, this person feeds me and houses me and takes care of me. They must be a god. And the cat's like, well, this person gives me food and shelter. I must be a god.
Yes. See, it's all a matter of perception, you know?
Yeah. Everything is perception, even in the animal kingdom.
I know, I love that. You know, that's a great writing exercise, is when you can take like the same story, but write it from a different character's point of view.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
I have a young son, and he's really into that Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there are a couple books where it actually comes from his best friend's point of view, and it's like, man, dude, you're a real asshole. You know that? Like,
Hold on, I've got to go get Stormy.
but it's really cool to see things from like a different character's perspective, and thinking of that with writing, like it's really cool to see like when authors come from the same scene and they come from different points of view, and they see it how like different characters see it.
Yeah.
Like I think that's really admirable to be able to see something from so many different points of view, you know, and especially made up people's points of view, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
So have y'all read any of Leah M. Hall's books?
Who, what?
Leah Hall? She's an indie author. She's got a series. It's the St. James series. And basically the two first books, it's Within These Walls and Between These Trees, are talking basically about the husband and his wife and, you know, their point of view. And then the third book, Beneath the Surface, is from their child's point of view.
Oh.
And it is so good. I'm talking like Lifetime movie, like get it on TV.
Yeah. That's what I was just thinking too, coming from each family member's perspective. Wow.
It's really good. Like it's wow.
Yeah. I bet that would be really good to check out.
Yeah.
What
And
was
I think they
what
are
was the
on-
author's name? The author's name?
Leah M. Hall. And I believe those books are also on Kindle Unlimited, I believe.
Oh.
Yep.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm glad you all were able to continue. Was
Yeah.
it still recording and everything?
We missed you.
Yeah. Glad you're back.
Thanks for keeping it going. Yeah, the suddenly being bought out by Optimum, yeah, it didn't help us at all. It
Oh
still
no.
sounds just a new name.
I'm currently like, I have no Wi-Fi where I live. Like this house, aside from like the one bedroom having something in the weird corner, like I can't even get HughesNet up here. The guy came up, he looked at all the trees around my house. He stopped like in the middle of my driveway and he was like, "You're funny. Like it's not." I was like, okay.
We're
So
I
My
choose
doctor is saying that T-Mobile has a thing now. T-Mobile, you can go and get a modem, and it's like $50 a month. And she lives up on the hill, out in the woods, kind of.
Yeah.
And she was saying that her neighbors were able to use it, but the thing is, they claim that you can't get service in her area. But that it does work, and it's only $50 a month. I'm paying $160.
Yeah.
And you see what type of service I get.
Yeah. The only option we have on this road is Verizon, but I guess they only have so many ports and all of the ports are full. So basically someone on my road has to cancel their service and I have to just call in at the right time to get it hooked up to my address. I'm
That's
like
crazy.
Yeah. It has been a
Okay,
struggle.
I'm back.
Yeah, it's funny. I live so far back in the woods that like the cable company sends me advertisements in the mail all the time about switching to them and how much I can save instead of going through my phone company. I'm like, great, come on over. Tell me what you can give me. I'm all about saving money. I'm broke just like, the next guy down the street. And then they come down and they like, yeah, I got to call this in. And I'm like, what's the problem? Like, oh, well, we'll get back to you. Oh, we don't service your area. And I'm like, oh, really? Then how come I know like 5 people in my town with your service? Is it just because my driveway's over 700 feet long and I live in the middle of the woods and I'm surrounded by trees and you don't want to have to foot the bill to put the wires down my driveway? Why don't you just be honest with me instead of lying to me and tell me that you don't service my town?
Yeah. Same boat. I feel you. I feel pain.
And it's like, plus, do I look that poor? Maybe I would pay for the wires to come down my driveway. Hello, judgmental much?
Yeah. People are like, oh, artists, they don't make any,
Yeah,
artists,
exactly. Oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, you're a writer. Oh, yeah, she can't afford us.
Well, I will say,
I really
would have to be that person and bug out. It's a school night or school day tomorrow.
oh
But I've really enjoyed meeting and talking with you guys. I'm definitely looking forward to doing this again. And Tammy, thank you so much for setting
Me
this up.
too.
This has been awesome.
Absolutely.
But
it's
have
been
a great
amazing.
night, guys, and I will look forward to chatting with you next time.
Yes.
Thank
Night.
you for being with us.
Thank
Night.
you. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
This
Yeah,
is way
it's-
past my bedtime.
Yeah, it's almost midnight, guys.
I know,
Oh,
but it
good.
was so much fun.
Oh,
Yeah,
Everybody
for sure.
keep on. I'm glad
Let's
you all had enjoyed yourselves. We will definitely do this again.
yeah, it's
Yay!
Sounds great.
10:40.
My
Yes.
channel.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. It was fun. Good night,
Definitely.
everybody.
Night.
Have a good night, guys.